Hey, I'm Dan. Today I'm going to walk you through how I made this skate ledge. Now I wanted it to be adjustable height and easy to fit in the back of my car so I could take it to a local flat parking lot or hook it up on a curb to practice a mini hubba. Whatever you want to do with a ledge, having an adjustable height and portable makes it easier for you to learn tricks along the way. Couple of disclaimers before we get started. First, nothing in this video is sponsored. Second, there are companies that already make ledges, OC and Keen. I'm sure there's others. You might even have a local builder. Support them, right? If what they have meets your needs, then just order one of their kits and put it together. I built this because I wanted something that was adjustable height in a particular size, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. Couple other disclaimers: you should have some decent woodworking and construction skills. If not, get somebody to help you out. You're probably going to need to have an electric drill. Ideally, maybe a chop saw like this. At the very least, kind of a jigsaw. At the very, very least, a saw like this. It's amazing how many home projects I've actually accomplished for this over the years. You're going to want to protect your hands, protect your ears, and of course, protect your eyes. So what do we have here? This is a ledge that's it's a DIY. I mean, this is totally made out of actually scrap wood that I had with a piece of angle iron that I got at my local big box store. And skateboarding has a rich history in DIY, right? From the very first skateboards where somebody cut the bottom of a roller skate with metal wheels in half and bolted onto a plank of wood and said, hey, let's try this out. From that until today, DIY has a rich history in skateboarding. And there's a reason when you see like the best pro parts that come out, right? They're on the streets or they're in DIY setups. They're not in these really, really nice, SLS parks. So this is something to be celebrated and, encouraged as more skaters continue to pick up the sport. You might want to build some stuff yourself. You might want to build a ledge like this. You might have an awesome ledge at your skate park. I have a pretty decent one at mine. It's 13 inches tall, which I bet if you're already a great ledge skater, that's great. But for somebody like me who's learning these tricks, I'm not going to try a crooked grind on a 13-inch ledge because I'm going to fall off of it and twist my ankle or hurt myself in some way. So I want to try that on a smaller height first and then work my way up to the larger height. I kind of liken it to those Mythbusters episodes where they were trying something out and they did a small scale experiment first, and then once they proved out the theory in the small scale experiment, they go to the large scale. And I want to do the same thing as I'm learning tricks. Skateboarding is all about building muscle memory and building confidence. And I want to build those at the small scale when the risks are lower, and then be able to translate that to the larger scale so I can hit the bigger obstacles at the skate park. All right, let's take a look at how I built this, and then we'll pull it apart and put it back together again so you can see how to do it yourself. All right, let's talk about dimensions. So this ledge is 18 inches front to back, 18 inches wide. And that ends up being just about perfect because when you're working on some new trick and if you mess up, you have enough room to step off and not kill yourself falling off the other side. It's also wide enough to be able to do a board slide. Now, it's not wide enough to be a mani pad. 18 inches is, maybe if you're awesome, you could do a manual across this, but 18 inches, you really need like 2.5 feet. My mani pad is 2 feet wide, and that's a little bit narrow. 2.5 feet is kind of a nice minimum for a mani pad. So it's not a mani pad, it's a ledge, and think of it as that. Now, this is 6 feet long, and 6 feet long is kind of nice because you can buy angle iron in 6 foot length at the big box store, so you don't have to cut it. And it's also it's just the perfect amount of room to be able to spot your landing as you're coming up and then adjust yourself and then get yourself ready to go off on the other side. If it's much shorter than 6 feet, you're not going to have a lot of time to react. The first one that I made actually was only 4 feet long, and that's not enough. Your skateboard's almost 3 feet long, and so you just don't have enough room to get up there and get back off, unless you're already awesome at ledges, which of course I'm not, which is why I made a ledge to learn. I think some of the ones you can buy online are 5 feet long, and so maybe measure your car first to see how much room you have. 5 feet's probably okay, but you're not going to have as much room to adjust, and you're going to find yourself going off the other side pretty quick, especially if you're going fast. Also, if you go down below 6 feet, you're going to have to cut through this angle iron, and so probably get a couple of new hacksaw blades and expect to be cutting for over an hour to get through that, because this is pretty solid steel. All right, let's look at the rest of it. Okay, the base construction is actually just made out of 2x4s. It's just a rectangle of 2x4s. And then I have 4x4s as leg supports. Now this front 4x4, I actually put a 2x4 underneath it. And the reason for that is you're gonna land on top of this angle iron here and you wanna transfer all that force straight down to the ground. And if you don't have this 2x4 here, then the thing will kind of tilt forward when you do that. The angle iron is made out of steel. Do not get aluminum. You'll be severely disappointed because you'll bang it up in a hurry. Get steel. I did not glue this on. I actually screwed it on. I'll show you how to do that because you can see the screws here. And I put the screws down pretty far because you want to get below this piece of 1/2-inch plywood that's on top. So you actually are screwing into the 2x4, not the plywood. And you also want to clear, the front of your truck. So when you do things like nose slides, you don't run into those screws. What else? A nice piece of plywood on top. You're going to want to get a good smooth piece of plywood. 1/2-inch is plenty thick to be strong enough. And if you go to 3/4 inch, it's going to be super heavy and you're going to have a hard time getting it in your car. This is, I think, a birch that I got. It was actually a remnant left over from another project, but it ended up being just perfect for this. And so you'll probably spend the majority of your money on this plywood for the top, but it's worth it because when you fall on that thing, you don't want to get splinters. So get a nice sheet of plywood up there. All right, first step is to build the frame. And what you see here is actually made out of 2 2x4s. So there's an 18-inch here, an 18-inch on the other end, and then 2 2x4s on the sides that are 6 feet minus 3 inches, right? Because there's 1.5 inches here and 1.5 inches on the other end. And those are just screwed together with like 2.5-inch drywall screws. And you can do those cuts yourself. You might even be able to have your lumber store do all the cuts for you. They'll usually do cuts for a pretty nominal fee. So you might not even have to do any of these cuts yourself. So what you make out of that is this frame that's 6 feet by 1.5 feet. And then of course you screw the plywood on top of it. I'd recommend countersinking each of these before you screw them in so you don't end up with splinters that you'll run into later. Next step is to fit the angle iron. All right, when you go to get your plywood, it's probably going to be in a 4x8 sheet. And one thing you can do is at the hardware store, you can have them cut it for you. Makes it easier to transport in your car. And also, you could get a mani pad out of this as well. So if you have them make a cut here at 6 feet and then at 18 inches, what you then have is your 1.5 feet by 6 feet for your ledge. And then over here, you've got 2.5 feet by 6 feet, which is actually a pretty great size for a mani pad. Now this mani pad, you just put 3 2x6s across it like this. And for the end caps, you can either do 2x6s or you could cut end caps out of this leftover plywood over here and make those your end caps. Not gonna talk anymore about the mani pad, but that's an easy way that you can make full use of the money you're spending on that nice 4x8 sheet of plywood and get your ledge out of this piece here. All right, the angle iron is next. This angle iron, I think, is about 1.5 inches, 3/16 inch thick. I would go with the thinnest steel angle iron you can get. I have some thinner angle iron on my mani pad, and it's actually a bit more buttery, so this one is a little harsh, but it's all right. Now, dry fit it first, because that angle iron is not going to be perfectly square. So kind of dry fit it, figure out which way is going to work the best, and where you want to drill the holes. To drill the holes, we'll turn this back over and we'll clamp it onto the bottom just to hold it in place while we drill. All right, so there's 2 different ways you could attach the angle iron onto your ledge. You could put it on with construction adhesive, and if you're happy with that, you think it's gonna hold, then go for it. I actually didn't want to mess with that, and I wanted to screw it on. And so I drilled these holes in it. I'll show you how to do it. First, you have to figure out a drill bit that's the right size to let the screw through. And if you just take a normal wood drill bit like this and try to drill through this metal, it's not going to work very well. But if you take a little bit of oil, this is some leftover lawnmower oil that I have, and you use this to keep the, just pour a little bit of it in a dish. It's an old cat food jar. And you see I've clamped the angle iron onto this 2x4 to hold it in place while I do the work. And then from there, every time that you go to drill, you just dip the tip of the drill bit into the oil first, drill for about 10 seconds, dip it again, drill for another 10 seconds. You don't want to see any smoke coming out. That's the real key. Let's do that. Also helps if you put your drill on the highest speed you got. I mentioned this earlier, but you want to actually position it pretty far down the angle iron. You have to clear that 1/2 inch of plywood, and then maybe another 1/4 inch or at least 3/8 of an inch below that. You don't want to get too close to the bottom edge, but you want to get pretty close to the bottom edge of your angle iron. So I'm going to move this down to about right there. Give it a shot. All right, so I'm going to dip it in the oil, drill a bit, dip it in the oil, drill a bit, dip it in the oil, drill a bit. You get the point. That's how you go through it. Now, once you have the hole through, then you're going to want to countersink it so those screws aren't sticking out too far. So then you have to find another drill bit where the top of that drill bit matches the angle of the top of your screw. Do the same thing to countersink. Dip it in the oil, countersink. Dip it in the oil, countersink. When you're done, what you end up with is a nice hole that's the right size for the screw and a countersink. All right, once you've got your angle iron drilled and ready to go, then you just pick an edge, put it in place, and start screwing it in place. You might have to fiddle a little bit with the curvature of your angle iron compared to the curvature of your wood. Maybe start at one side and then go to the far other side and get it as flat as you can, and then do the ones in the middle. What you end up with is screws that are pretty close to flush on the front edge, but far enough down that your trucks aren't going to run into them. And then nothing on the top, just nice and clean across the top. All right, at this point what you have is a ledge that's just 4 inches tall. So it's a very short ledge. I generally probably not going to do much on something that's this short, although if you're just learning, this might actually be a great height. In fact, if I was working on something like, let's say a pop shove it, 50-50, I'd actually do it on this height first. Just because if you mess up, like, the ramifications are really low. You can just roll away from it, right? Do that a few times before you go up a level. So this is a box that you can start with. The next thing we've got to do is put some legs on it. All right. Okay, so there's a couple of different ways to put legs on something like this. The most traditional way, you've probably seen these before, is to actually replicate this rectangle frame of 2x4s further up, and then just use 2x4s to connect the top frame and the bottom frame. And that's nice and heavy, it's very sturdy, but it's almost too heavy to be portable. I didn't actually want to do that because I wanted to make it more portable. But you can do that. If you have sort of a fixed height and you're not going to move it around much, then just make a second copy of this frame with 2x4s, put it up here, put some 2x4s to connect it in each of the corners, and you're done. And you can make it whatever height you want, but it's probably going to be a little bit harder to change the height on it. What I did instead was I used 4x4s. These were also left over from another project, but you can just get a 6 or an 8 foot long 4x4 and chop it up into whatever length you want so that you can set the height of your ledge. Now, in this case, I'm doing most of my work at 10 inches tall. I found that was a really good height for learning for me, but I also like to go down to 6 inches tall as well. So what I ended up with is legs for the back that are 9.5 inches tall. So you add that 1/2 inch top on it as well, so 10 inch total. And you've got 2 in the back and then 2 in the front. As I mentioned before, I put these little 2x4 cleats on there so that when you land on that angle iron right there, the force comes through the 2x4 cleat to the ground and it doesn't tilt forward. Now you'll also notice that I've got some kind of rubber in here, and that's actually DKL grip tape. I tried this at one point in time, decided not to make it my mainstay for grip tape, but it works really, really great as an anti-slip on the bottom legs of skate obstacles. The one thing is when you put it on, you want to leave pressure on it for a couple of days so that it really, really sticks. Sometimes you'll get this flip up like you see here. It's probably time to replace these, but that's a really good trick, and that works as well. The last thing that I'll do is, if I want to make it easy to switch between 10 inches tall and 6 inches tall, then I took a couple of just leftover 2x2s or 2x4s, and I just kind of screw them into the corners. So then all I have to do is take off the main legs, and I'm left with these 2x2s here, so I can have a 6 inch ledge, or I put this back on and I have a 10 inch ledge. and it makes it easy to switch between the different heights. I think that's it, guys. I think we've covered everything there is about this ledge. I'm going to put it back together again, show you what it's like to slide it into the back of my car, go to a local parking lot, a park, somewhere, work on some kind of skating. I think I'm done talking about building a ledge. I think it's time to go skate a ledge. Hope this has been helpful for you. Thanks for tuning in. Maybe you'll build your own. Let me know in the comments. And or don't let me know in the comments. That's fine too. You can keep it to yourself. Yeah, let's get out there and skate again. Thanks. Have a good one. Using some 2.5-inch screws to hold the legs into the corners. Put this back in place now. Final weight's 48 pounds. Still light enough to move around, but heavy enough that it doesn't slide too much when you're skating it. Bring the drill so I can change the height later. Hey, one thing I forgot to mention, when you're all done, you probably want to take a metal file and kind of smooth off the edges of the angle iron, some sandpaper on the top, a little bit of wax right on the top of the angle iron and the front of the angle iron, and you're ready to shred. If you're doing something that requires a lot of force, like slapping nose slides, then you can push it up against a curb or a parking lot just to make it a little more sturdy.